He was the only black man in the room, the one they barely looked at except to laugh, the one they told to take notes and fetch coffee while they whispered about cutting deals that would gut his community for profit. They didn't know who he really was. They didn't know whose signature they truly needed. They thought he was powerless, just another hired hand to clean up their language and sell their lie to the board. But before this meeting ended, they were going to find out exactly how much it costs to underestimate the wrong man. If you want to see how this story unfolds, how arrogance turns to ruin and justice takes its price, like the video, subscribe for the full series, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Let's talk about what happens when the man you tried to humiliate holds your entire future in his hands. Royce Mallory arrived at the Stratton & Company headquarters before dawn, his leather shoes clicking quietly on the marble lobby floor. The building was a gleaming tower of corporate pride, all steel and glass reflecting the pale morning light of a city not quite awake. Royce adjusted his charcoal overcoat and walked with measured calm toward the security desk, where a bleary-eyed guard barely looked up from his tablet. He didn't draw attention, and that was exactly the point. He scanned his visitor badge, issued under the generic title of strategy consultant, then stepped into the hushed, polished elevator. No one here had the faintest idea who he really was. That was the plan. He wanted to see them at their most unfiltered. As the elevator rose silently, Royce leaned back, listening to the muted hum of the cables, thinking of how many times he'd sat in rooms like the one upstairs, but never on their terms. He was always the one invited to prove something, to be the token voice of change while they all congratulated themselves on progress. But this time was different. The doors opened on the 27th floor with a soft ping. The hall was pristine, decorated with framed mission statements. Integrity, collaboration, equity, words that sounded noble but rang hollow to him now. He passed them with a flick of his eyes and entered the large glass-walled conference room. It was empty. Royce smiled to himself, choosing a seat at the far end of a long oak table. He placed his slim leather folio down, opened it carefully, and began writing, not company notes, but observations. This was his advantage. Patience. Silence. Watch how they really talk before the show starts. He didn't have to wait long. At 7:15, Delaney Price, head of strategy, walked in, checking his phone as he mumbled curses about traffic. He didn't see Royce at first. He made a beeline for the coffee maker in the corner, filling a cup and muttering about the quality. He was joined moments later by Theron Briggs, VP of Operations, who wore a smug expression that seemed permanent. Theron dropped his leather bag on the table with a thud. "God, another diversity strategy meeting," he said with an exaggerated groan. Delaney snorted, stirring his coffee. "Investors love it. Makes us look socially conscious. All while we keep supplier costs where they belong." Royce kept his head down, writing. They hadn't noticed him yet. Theron lowered his voice just enough to sound conspiratorial, but not enough to hide. "Let's call it partnership while we squeeze the margins dry. Gotta clean up the optics." Delaney smirked. "We'll hire someone who looks the part. Gotta love window dressing." Royce's pen paused, then continued moving. At last, Delaney spotted him. He squinted. "Oh, morning. You with facilities." Royce looked up calmly. "Consultant." Theron raised an eyebrow, scanning Royce's suit and skin. "Consultant, huh? For what?" "Making sure our press release hits all the right words." Delaney laughed, covering his mouth. "Theron, be nice. Don't want HR writing us up again." They laughed together. Royce didn't smile. He just nodded slightly and returned to writing. The room continued to fill. Kyle, a young analyst, offered a half-hearted nod to Royce, then turned away, pretending he hadn't seen anything. Cassius Holcomb, the CEO himself, arrived at 7:30 on the dot, making an entrance with his tailored Italian suit, silver hair, and cold, appraising eyes. He saw Royce instantly. He didn't greet him. Instead, Cassius turned to Delaney and Theron, clasping their shoulders with practiced ease. "Gentlemen, morning. Ready to make us look good today?" "Always," Delaney said with a bright, fake grin. Cassius gave Theron a wry look. "How's the supplier list?" Anyone new worth screwing over? Theron snorted. We'll keep them hungry. Tell them it's an opportunity to grow. Kyle forced an awkward laugh. Royce simply watched. Cassius finally turned to Royce, his gaze flicking over him without warmth. Who's this? Delaney shrugged. Consultant. Cassius didn't bother offering a handshake. He turned away. As long as he's cheap. Royce wrote that down, word for word. Amara Lee, HR rep, entered 10 minutes later, walking carefully, as if aware of every eye on her. She offered Royce a small, hesitant nod. He returned it with perfect calm. Morning, she said brightly to the room. Theron leaned back in his chair. HR keeping us honest. Can't wait to hear how racist we are for wanting to make money. Amara's smile didn't falter, but her fingers gripped her portfolio tighter. I'm just here to make sure we don't say anything that ends up on the front page. Cassius chuckled. Let's not pretend. Investors don't care if we squeeze local vendors dry. They care that we look like we don't. Theron nodded eagerly. We'll highlight a few Black-owned suppliers. Get them locked in with tough terms. Claim it's partnership. Kyle offered, we can call it empowering the underserved. Sounds good on paper. Delaney chimed in. And make sure their contracts are airtight. No union talk. Keep the order volume small so they can't negotiate rates. Delaney Price sat to his right, fingers drumming thoughtfully on a sleek tablet, and Theron Briggs lounged back in his chair, checking email with all the seriousness of a man who had never been told no in his life. Kyle fidgeted beside him, scrolling through a marketing deck, trying to look engaged, but obviously uncomfortable with the tone of the conversation so far. Amara Lee sat 2 seats away from Royce, her face a mask of polite professionalism, but the tension in her shoulders gave her away. Cassius cleared his throat with theatrical weight. All right, let's get real. We know why we're here. We have to sell the board on this inclusive strategy crap before they start getting heat from investors about our supplier list. Theron snorted, leaning forward. What's the target here? 3 or 4 Black-owned vendors. Enough to look good, but not enough to mess with pricing. Delaney smirked, checking his notes. We'll say we're committed to growing partnerships in underserved markets. That's the language. Investors love it. Makes them feel virtuous while we lock them in on our terms. Kyle laughed nervously. Yeah, and if they can't keep up with demand, that's their problem. We'll have a cheaper fallback ready. Cassius's mouth curved into a cold smile. Exactly. They'll be grateful for the exposure while we hold the real power. Royce wrote it all down, every word. He kept his head down, face neutral, eyes flicking between them, capturing every smirk, every knowing glance. At last, Delaney seemed to remember him. He paused mid-sentence and peered down the table with a slight frown. Royce, right? Consultant. Royce met his eyes steadily. That's right. Delaney exhaled as if annoyed. Okay, look, we don't want too many cooks here. This is real strategy talk, not the sanitized stuff for the press. Maybe want to wait in the hall until we're ready to draft the formal plan. Royce didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply asked in a calm, even tone, is there a reason I can't hear the discussion I'm supposed to be summarizing? Theron laughed and sipped his coffee. Oh, come on. Don't get sensitive. We just don't want to waste time explaining the details. We need real decision makers in here. Delaney shrugged with faux sympathy. We appreciate you, Royce, but this isn't really your lane. Cassius didn't even bother to look at Royce. He was too busy checking his phone, scanning through shareholder reports. Royce's pen hovered over the page. He clicked it shut. Then he looked up at Delaney and smiled faintly. I see. Delaney blinked at the tone. Look, no offense. If you want to hang around, grab us some coffee, maybe help Amara set up the presentation. That's fine. Royce nodded, still smiling, but his eyes were cold. Sure, happy to help. Theron snickered. That's the spirit. Team player. Amara's face went stiff. She opened her mouth, closed it again. She cleared her throat uncomfortably, fingers twisting the pen in her lap. Cassius finally looked up. Is there an actual problem here? Because I don't have time to coddle feelings this morning. Royce shook his head once. No problem at all. I'll stay. I'd like to hear everything. Theron rolled his eyes. Suit yourself. Don't cry about it later when HR has to clean it up. Cassius let out an irritated sigh. Can we get back to the actual plan? Delaney, keep going. Delaney turned away from Royce as if dismissing him entirely. He pulled up the deck on the main screen, flicking through slides that were nothing but euphemisms for exploitation. One read, maximize supplier diversity PR value. Another, secure contracts with strict terms to limit cost volatility. And another, craft messaging around community uplift. Kyle raised his hand sheepishly. Maybe we should, actually invest in their capacity? Otherwise, we risk headlines about taking advantage. Cassius's laugh was mirthless. We're not a charity. This is business. Let the marketing team figure out the words. We're here to make sure they don't bankrupt us with demands for equity or fair pricing. Delaney added with a smirk, we'll dangle the exposure. That's the carrot. The contract terms are the stick. Theron leaned in conspiratorially. They'll sign whatever we put in front of them. They're desperate to be seen working with us. Royce didn't flinch. He just wrote, carefully, neatly, each phrase, each laugh, each casual cruelty. Amara finally found her voice. It was small, strained. I think we need to be cautious about how this reads, at the very least. Some of this language could be problematic if it leaks. Theron waved her off. Relax. It's not like we're publishing the raw notes. We'll have Royce clean it up before anyone sees it. Cassius chuckled, leaning back with the ease of a man in control. That's what he's here for. Sanitize the truth. Wrap it up in a bow for the board. Investors want to see the right words, not the messy reality. Delaney turned back to Royce one more time, voice syrupy but dismissive. You good with that? Just remember you're here to serve the process, not direct it. Royce met his gaze with perfect stillness. Understood. The room relaxed. Theron snorted. See? He gets it. Amara swallowed hard and didn't look at Royce again. Cassius clapped his hands once. All right. Enough chatter. Let's get to work. We're on a deadline. I want a finished plan by noon. Cassius Holcomb presided at the head of the table with an air of lazy arrogance, drumming his fingers on the wood as he listened to his executives propose increasingly cynical strategies. Delaney Price steered the conversation with the precision of a seasoned schemer, sliding the presentation along with a tap of his tablet, summarizing every self-serving idea with rehearsed corporate polish. Theron Briggs sprawled in his seat, tie loosened, leaning back as if he owned the room, which in many ways he did. He punctuated every joke with a grin sharp enough to cut. Amara Lee tried once or twice to clear her throat and intervene, but her voice was lost under the crashing wave of easy cruelty. The junior staff shifted uncomfortably but stayed silent, glancing at one another as if unsure whether to laugh or cringe. Royce continued to write. Okay, Cassius said finally, voice flat and commanding. We're wasting time. We have the bones. Let's hear how we actually execute. Theron snickered. We assign a few contracts to the right businesses. Make sure they know they're lucky to get them. Keep orders small so they're dependent. They'll take what we give them and say thank you. Delaney added, the key is messaging. We talk about empowerment, community growth, but internally we set targets on margin preservation. It's just math. Kyle glanced nervously at Royce, but quickly looked away when Theron caught him staring. Royce watched them for a long moment. Penn paused. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet but clear, slicing through the haze of laughter and ego. What if instead, he said evenly, you built a supplier development program that actually increased their capacity, created real partnerships? That would give you scalable long-term savings, loyalty, and brand equity investors would pay to see. Silence crashed over the room. All eyes turned to him. Cassius blinked, expression hardening like stone. Delaney squinted, tilting his head. Theron's mouth fell open for an instant before splitting into a cruel grin. Whoa, Theron drawled, leaning forward. Big words for the help. What was that? Supplier development program. You've been reading Forbes in the break room. The laughter was instant. Kyle covered his mouth and failed to hide his snicker. Even Delaney cracked a grin, glancing at Theron in approval. Royce didn't flinch. He met Theron's eyes calmly. It's not complicated. If you want consistent margins without the risk of supplier churn or lawsuits, you invest in them. Bring them to the table instead of locking them out. Theron clapped slowly, mockingly. Beautiful. Inspirational. Really, man, you should write speeches. Maybe for the next NAACP dinner. Kyle snorted loudly. Be careful, Theron. He might call HR for being mean to the diversity in turn. More laughter. Royce's pen tapped once on his pad. Amara's face went pale. She opened her mouth, but Cassius cut her off with a raised hand. Enough, Cassius said coldly. He fixed Royce with a look that suggested something unpleasant under the surface. We're not here to discuss charity. We're here to talk strategy that works. Royce didn't move. Long-term strategy does work if you build sustainability. Cassius's eyes narrowed. That's not your role here. Royce met his stare without blinking. You asked for execution plans. Theron put his feet up on the table, looking bored. Look, man, maybe this works in theory where you come from. But in the real world, we don't need to hold hands and sing kumbaya with suppliers. We need them cheap, fast, and scared to negotiate. Delaney shrugged. Theron's right. Investors want us to control costs. That's the brief. We don't have the budget to be saints. Kyle, emboldened by the tone, piped up. Besides, if they get too comfortable, they'll unionize or demand equity. Then what? We get written up in the Wall Street Journal for giving away the store. Theron mimed writing notes. We, the board, regret to inform you we listened to the intern. More laughter. Royce didn't respond. He simply watched them all, pen resting on the paper, his breathing even. Cassius leaned forward. Look, let's cut the bullshit. We know what this is. We need a diversity plan that passes board review, gets PR on our side, and doesn't cost real money. Anything else is irrelevant. Royce said nothing. Cassius continued, voice dripping disdain. If you're here to suggest otherwise, maybe you're not as good at this consulting thing as you think. Theron added, yeah, maybe you should stick to writing the press release and leave the thinking to us. Royce's eyes flicked to Amara, whose face was rigid with embarrassment and anger. She tried one last time. We should be careful about the language. If these notes ever leak, Cassius snapped, that's why we have him. He's here to make it pretty. Filter out the truth so no one sues us. Delaney nodded. Exactly. Royce, just make sure you get the spirit of this, but don't use these words. Theron pointed at him with a lazy finger. Yeah, big words, but dumb ideas. Don't forget your place. Royce clicked his pen closed. Slowly, deliberately, he made a final note. Cassius waved a hand. All right, enough of that. Delaney, keep us moving. Theron, work with marketing to make this a story about opportunity. Kyle, start the ROI projections on supplier rates. Amara, make sure HR has something ready in case the optics get bad. Amara nodded stiffly. Theron shot Royce one more smirk. Hey man, you want to get us coffee if you're not busy saving the world. Kyle laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. Royce stood without a word. He closed his folio carefully and set his pen on top of it. He looked around the room, meeting every eye, not a single muscle moving in his face. Amara Lee sat with her arms folded tightly, eyes lowered, her discomfort obvious to Royce even from across the room. For a heartbeat, Royce considered simply leaving. But then he turned back, voice quiet but carrying easily across the table. Before I go, there's one last proposal you might want to hear. The room fell quiet, more in surprise than respect. Cassius finally glanced up, annoyance flashing in his eyes. You're still here. Theron laughed. Guess the help has a dream to share. Let's hear it, Dr. King. Royce didn't flinch. He walked back to his seat with deliberate calm, placed a folio in front of him, and flipped it open to a carefully prepared page. He raised his eyes to meet Cassius's. If you're serious about controlling long-term supplier costs, protecting brand equity, and avoiding lawsuits or PR disasters, you need to actually invest in supplier development. a partnership program, structured financing, shared resources. You'd create reliable production, loyal vendors, and a marketing story no competitor could match. Silence met his words at first, a heavy, assessing silence, as Cassius sat back and squinted at him. For a moment, Royce thought he might actually listen. But then Theron let out a snort, leaning forward with theatrical disbelief. A partnership program? For who? The urban crowd you're so desperate to uplift? Come on, Royce. They don't have $3 billion to their name. They're lucky to even be at our table. Royce's fingers tightened around his pen. He forced his voice to stay calm. They have markets you can't reach without them. Loyalty you can't buy. If you invest, you can lead the entire segment. Delaney chuckled humorlessly. Invest. In people who can't even keep the lights on without our contracts. That's adorable. Theron grinned. It's charity with better branding, except more expensive, which means it's stupid. Kyle, emboldened, piped up. You're talking about paying to give away our leverage. It's insane. They'll unionize or demand a seat at the table. Then what? We hold hands and sing about justice while our costs skyrocket. Royce stared at him. You'd have loyalty, predictability, PR that actually means something, savings over time. Theron shook his head slowly, mocking. Listen to this guy. Predictability, savings over time. Who talks like that? Man, you must practice this in the mirror. Kyle snickered. Yeah, maybe in front of his diversity mentor. Get that approval badge stamped. Royce set his pen down carefully. You asked for real strategy. Theron leaned back, smirking. We asked for real strategy, not a damn charity plan. Cassius finally lifted a hand, quieting the laughter. His voice was ice. You want us to commit capital to people who'll turn around and bite us the first chance they get? The second they smell leverage? You want us to tell the board to give away control to suppliers we're supposed to dominate? Royce didn't break eye contact. I want you to see the risk of not doing it. You're building a powder keg. If they organize, or if someone else backs them, you'll lose more than you save. And if this plan leaks, your brand dies. Cassius's gaze darkened. We'll manage the risk. We'll manage the leak. That's why we have lawyers, Payot, and people like you to write it up pretty. Your job is to make the plan we tell you look acceptable, not question whether it's moral. Royce didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply said, then I can't help you. Theron clapped slowly. Thank God. For a minute, I thought we'd be stuck here all day listening to your TED Talk. Kyle laughed. Delaney made a show of rolling his eyes. Okay, Cassius said coldly. Let's vote. Who wants to pursue Royce's generous partnership model? Royce sat in silence as they raised their hands in mocking unison. Every single one voted no. Theron put on a theatrical frown. Unanimous. That's democracy for you. Kyle added, don't forget to note that in your minutes, Royce. Proposed plan. Rejected unanimously because it's idiotic. Royce wrote one last line in his folio. Noted. Cassius's voice dripped disdain. Good. Now that the sideshow is over, let's get back to real strategy. Royce looked at Amara. She didn't meet his eyes. She just stared at her tablet screen, frozen. He closed the folio slowly, feeling every mocking eye on him. Theron gave him a mock salute. Hey, coffee's still an option. Unless that's too oppressive for you. Kyle snorted. Careful, Theron. Don't want HR breathing down your neck for bullying the consultant. Cassius smirked. HR? Amara? Are you writing this down? She didn't answer. Cassius's eyes flicked to Royce. Anything else? Or have we indulged enough moral grandstanding for one morning? Royce stood carefully. He lifted the folio in one hand, smoothed his jacket with the other. His voice was steady and calm. No, I'm finished. Theron spread his arms wide in mock welcome. Don't let the door hit you. Royce looked at each of them in turn, one by one, memorizing their faces. Cassius's smug certainty, Delaney's polite scorn, Theron's open mockery, Kyle's adolescent sniggering, Amara's silent misery. He said nothing more. Then he turned and walked slowly to the door, closing it behind him with the softest click imaginable. Outside in the hallway, the noise of the meeting resumed instantly, the laughter returning, louder now that he was gone. He opened his leather folio, flipping through page after page of tight, meticulous notes. Every slur dressed up as strategy, every smirk, every plan to gut partner, businesses while polishing their corporate image. He closed the folio with a quiet snap and exhaled, steadying himself. Then he turned back and re-entered the conference room without knocking. The room fell briefly silent as Royce walked back to his chair and sat down without a word. Cassius Holcomb's eyes narrowed with icy irritation. Decided you're not finished after all? Royce met his gaze evenly. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to take the rest of your notes. That's my role, isn't it? Theron Briggs snorted, leaning back in his chair. Look at this guy. Glutton for punishment. Kyle smirked, whispering something to Delaney Price that made Delaney hide a grin behind his hand. Cassius gave a curt nod. Fine. But stay quiet if you're staying. We're past your input. Royce didn't respond. He just opened his folio and clicked his pen. Delaney, emboldened, turned toward him, voice syrupy and patronizing. Royce, listen. Don't take any of that personally. You're very articulate. It's clear you're smart. But this is real business. These are tough calls. Royce didn't flinch. Meaning? Delaney smiled wider, as if talking to a child. Meaning we can't afford to let feelings get in the way of facts. We have investors to answer to, targets to hit. We can't prioritize, charity cases. Theron picked up the thread, voice mocking. Yeah, man. It's not about being mean. It's about making money. Don't cry about it. Royce wrote that down word for word. Theron rolled his eyes theatrically. Seriously? You gonna note everything? Gonna file a complaint with your mentor? Kyle laughed quietly. Cassius tapped the table. Gentlemen, let's keep this civil enough for HR's benefit. He turned to Amara Lee, who sat stiffly at the far side of the table, eyes down. Amara, you've been awfully quiet. Don't you have something to add here? Amara looked up slowly, eyes flicking to Royce with a mix of discomfort and apology. She cleared her throat, her voice careful and falsely gentle. I think what everyone's trying to say is we want to be sure you're not too sensitive for our culture. Royce raised an eyebrow slowly. Sensitive. Amara pressed her lips together, eyes darting around the table for support. It's a demanding environment. Direct communication is part of our culture. We have to be able to challenge ideas, even if it feels uncomfortable. Theron made a show of nodding sagely. Yeah, toughen up. You want to play with the big boys, you take the hits. Royce clicked his pen shut. That's good advice. Delaney smiled approvingly. Exactly. See? You get it. We're not here to make friends. We're here to win. Royce's eyes remained fixed on Delaney. Win what exactly? The question cut through the smugness for a moment. Delaney hesitated, then waved a hand dismissively. Market share, profits, investor trust, the things that matter. Royce nodded slowly. Not people. Theron barked a laugh. Oh, here we go again. The morality play. Look, man, we can't save everyone. The world's tough. Grow up. Kyle added, yeah, and besides, they're happy to take the money. They know the game. Why should we pretend it's something it's not? Royce kept writing, every line precise, every word careful. Cassius watched him with a narrowed, calculating gaze. Royce, you need to understand your role here. You're not on the executive team. You're not setting strategy. You're here to package it. Make it look good. That's it. Royce didn't react. Cassius's voice grew softer, more menacing. We brought you in because we need someone who can translate our goals into something the board can swallow, not question our goals. Royce kept writing. Cassius's eyes flashed with cold amusement. But if that's too much for you, if you're too sensitive, well, HR can talk to you about fit. Amara shifted uncomfortably, opening her mouth, but saying nothing. Delaney leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, voice smooth as poison. Royce, seriously, you're good at this. You're very polished, very professional. Don't blow it by making this personal. Royce looked up at last, his voice flat. It is personal, to the people you're planning to exploit. Theron's eyes lit up with mock delight. Oh snap, he's angry. Kyle put on a worried face. Oh, he's making us feel unsafe. Amara's cheeks flushed with humiliation. That's enough, she muttered weakly. Cassius raised a single hand, silencing the laughter. His expression turned glacial. Write this down, Royce. This is your only real instruction. We are not changing the strategy. We are not investing in parasites who'll drain us dry the second they can. We are controlling them. We are profiting from them. And you will make that sound like community partnership. Understood? Royce didn't answer. He just wrote. Cassius's voice dropped to an icy whisper. Do you understand? Royce met his eyes with slow, deliberate focus. I understand perfectly. Cassius smiled without warmth. Good. Then let's continue. Delaney exhaled, sounding satisfied. Glad we cleared the air. Theron leaned back, smirking. Man, I love these honest talks. Theron Briggs lounged in his seat, feet propped arrogantly on the table's edge, tossing out sarcastic lines that sent Kyle into helpless snickers. Cassius Holcomb, CEO and unchallenged ruler of the floor, watched it all with thin-lipped approval, issuing quiet, chilling corrections when the language got too obvious for even him. Royce continued to write. He wrote every phrase, every polished insult, every plan laid out like the blueprint of a con. They didn't even hide it. He wondered if they even remembered he was there. When they glanced his way, it was only to ensure he was documenting their brilliance, translating exploitation into PR-friendly lies. At one point, Amara Lee had tried to speak up again, voice small but firm. She had said, "We need to make sure this doesn't come back to us in legal." Theron had cut her off with an exasperated laugh. Legal's job is to cover our asses. Royce's job is to make it sound good. Don't overcomplicate it. Cassius had shot Amara a warning look that shut her down entirely. She'd slumped in her chair, eyes glassy, notes untouched. The room smelled of burnt coffee and cold arrogance. Royce's pen never stopped moving. He wrote every word they said, carefully, deliberately, giving their plans the permanence they deserved. But finally, when the conversation turned to finalizing action items, something in him clicked. Cassius leaned forward, voice smooth as oil, saying, "Delaney, I want this deck investor ready by tomorrow. Theron, coordinate with marketing for the press release. Kyle, start running numbers on cutting supplier rates another 5%. We'll tell them it's industry standard." He turned his eyes lazily to Royce. "And you, make sure it all sounds like a goddamn mission statement." Royce closed his folio with a quiet snap. He clicked his pen closed and set it neatly on top. He pushed back from the table with the deliberate calm of a man refusing to scramble or apologize. He stood, drawing every eye in the room. Delaney blinked at him with mild confusion. Theron arched an eyebrow, smirk forming as if waiting for a punchline. Kyle's mouth hung open slightly, torn between amusement and nervousness. Cassius didn't move. He just watched Royce with that same calculating gaze, lips curling at the edges. Royce smoothed his jacket slowly, eyes locked on Cassius. He didn't speak. The silence stretched until it was taut as a wire. Finally, Cassius's mouth twitched in disdain. He tilted his head just enough to signal mock surprise. "Oh, you going somewhere?" Royce stayed silent, letting the question hang unanswered. Cassius snorted and looked around the room, inviting them all into the joke. Guess he's had enough truth for one morning. Theron made an exaggerated pout. "Ah, come on, Royce. Don't go. Who'll take our notes?" Delaney chuckled, failing to suppress it fully. Kyle actually covered his mouth with his hand, but his shoulders shook with laughter. Royce picked up his folio carefully. He took a single step back from the table, eyes never leaving Cassius's face. Cassius leaned forward slightly, fingers tapping the wood. His voice turned mock concerned. "Don't forget your notes, Royce. You make a great secretary." The room broke into laughter, so loud it seemed to rattle the glass walls. Even Amara winced, eyes falling to her lap. Theron wiped an imaginary tear from his eye. "Man, classic. Best one yet." Delaney snickered. Secretary of Diversity. Kyle wheezed out. He'll need a bigger notebook for all these big words. Cassius held up a hand, feigning order while his smile showed teeth. Gentlemen, let's not be rude. Royce is a professional. He knows his place. Royce didn't react. He didn't blink. He simply turned slowly toward the door, adjusting the folio under his arm. The laughter died in short, satisfied sighs. But Cassius wasn't finished. As Royce's hand touched the door handle, Cassius's voice rang out, lazy and cutting. Oh, Royce, one last thing. Royce paused but didn't turn. Cassius's voice turned cruelly cheerful. Be sure to tell your boss he better sign the deal this week before we rethink our price. Don't want his people to lose their shot at the big leagues. The words seemed to hit the room like a slap. Even Theron's grin faltered for an instant. Amara actually inhaled sharply, eyes darting between Royce and Cassius in horror. Royce turned his head just enough to let one cold eye lock on Cassius. He didn't say a word. Cassius leaned back in his chair, smugness returning full force. What? Just good business advice. Wouldn't want to see your folks blow their chance over principles. Theron let out a barking laugh. Yeah, Royce, don't mess it up for them. Delaney shook his head, feigning solemnity. Such a shame when opportunity is wasted on people who don't know how to use it. The sunlight through the towering windows struck the glass walls with clinical brilliance, illuminating motivational posters that spoke of integrity and partnership in glossy, hollow print. He read them as he passed without expression, then stopped at the end of the corridor, pressing a palm to the cool glass. Below him, the city sprawled in geometric precision, endless grids of traffic crawling between shining skyscrapers. 1,000 deals, 1,000,000 small humiliations enacted daily without witnesses. Except this one had a witness, and he had every word in their own voices. Royce lowered his hand slowly. He turned. Then he walked back. He didn't hurry. He didn't even straighten his suit jacket. He let the door swing open without knocking and re-entered the room in silence. The laughter faltered immediately when he appeared. Cassius Holcomb looked up with irritation that bordered on confusion. Oh, back again, he drawled, drawing the room's attention. Theron Briggs grinned from his slouched posture. Man, you are persistent. You forget your dignity in the hall. Delaney Price gave a small cough that might have been embarrassment or simply an attempt to hide his smile. Kyle sat stiffly, eyes darting from Royce to his bosses, eager to follow the lead of whoever won this battle. Amara Lee lifted her gaze slowly from her lap, eyes wide with dread, watching Royce with something like pleading. Royce didn't speak immediately. He let them look at him, their mockery coiling in the stale air like smoke from a cheap cigar. He set his folio down deliberately on the table's glossy surface, the click of leather on with the only sound in the room. Then he straightened and clasped his hands behind his back, his eyes traveling slowly around the table, meeting every stare without blinking. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet but so clear it cut through the stillness. Before I leave for good, there's one more thing I'd like to clarify. Cassius arched a brow, voice oozing with patronizing amusement. You need directions to the lobby? Or you want to leave your resume in case facilities is hiring? Theron let out a low laugh, slapping the table once in delight. Oh, let him speak. I'm dying to hear it. Royce ignored them both. He turned slightly to Delaney, who fidgeted but tried to keep his expression neutral. Just to make sure my notes are accurate, could you confirm the client name for this major deal you're finalizing? The one you keep describing as a sure thing. Delaney blinked, caught off guard. He shifted in his chair, shooting a glance at Cassius, who gestured lazily for him to answer. Delaney cleared his throat. It's the Parker-Madison deal. $3.2 billion contract. Some holding firm. Minority-owned group. They're hungry for our platform. We're going to get them on strict pricing terms while we have leverage. Royce didn't move. Parker-Madison. Delaney nodded, puzzled by the question. Yeah. Why? Theron smirked. Don't tell me you're trying to apply over there. They're not hiring for note-takers. Royce's face remained blank. He inclined his head slightly, the ghost of a nod. Then he reached down and lifted the folio again. He clicked it shut, with absolute finality, and tucked it under one arm. He looked at Cassius directly, gaze flat as black glass. "Thank you for confirming that." Cassius squinted, irritation mounting. "Are we done here?" Royce tilted his head a fraction. "Almost. I want to thank you for your honesty today. You've shown me exactly who you are." Cassius let out a dry, mocking laugh. "Oh, spare me the drama. You're about to give us a speech? You planning to film us for your LinkedIn page?" Theron's eyes danced with anticipation of another punchline. Delaney sat back, arms folding, defensive but uncertain. Kyle looked distinctly uncomfortable now, shifting in his seat, eyes dropping. Amara swallowed visibly, her breathing shallow, her fingers white-knuckling her pen. Royce watched them all carefully. Then he spoke. "You keep describing Parker Madison as desperate, as a group you can squeeze, threaten, humiliate. You've called them parasites, charity cases. You're willing to say anything you need to make the board approve exploiting them for every last cent." Cassius made a show of clapping slowly. Very moving. Get to the part where you're quitting so we can finish work." Royce didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. "I'm not quitting." His voice dropped a fraction, almost gentle. "I am terminating." Cassius's smirk froze. Theron let out a half-laugh that died in his throat. Royce set the folio back down on the table. With measured precision, he opened it to the first page. It bore a letterhead none of them had bothered to notice before. Parker Madison Holdings. He flipped to the second page, a fully executed master agreement, the signature line at the bottom perfectly visible. His own name, Royce E. Mallory, CEO and Managing Partner. He tapped it once with a single fingertip. The silence was absolute. Royce let it breathe. He watched them all absorb it in real time. Delaney went pale. Kyle's mouth dropped open. Theron sat back, eyes wide for the first time since Royce had entered the room that morning. Amara let out a small, strangled gasp, her eyes flying to Royce's face in raw disbelief and something like hope. Cassius's jaw worked silently for a moment before he managed to produce sound. This is a joke." Royce's eyes locked onto his. "No, this is the truth. I own Parker Madison. Every cent you're banking on for this quarter belongs to my firm's approval. And I've just decided your deal is over." Cassius's face flushed red, blotchy with rage he tried to suppress. "You can't just cancel it. We've invested." Royce raised a hand, silencing him as easily as if he'd slapped him. "I can, and I just did. I'm under no obligation to do business with people who describe my team as parasites, or who would rather starve them than partner with them." But it still felt good to see their faces when they realized the man they'd mocked was the only person whose approval they actually needed. He reached the end of the corridor where the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city's brightening sprawl, the sun slicing between towers like a blade. He paused there, phone in hand, thumb hovering over a single contact. For a moment he simply watched the city. Then he exhaled and pressed the call button. The line clicked immediately. "Yes, Mr. Mallory," a voice answered crisply. Royce's own voice was quiet but iron hard. "Pull the contract. Terminate the deal. Effective immediately." A beat of silence on the line, then understood. "I'll notify legal and send the withdrawal. Any specific language?" Royce's eyes didn't move from the skyline. "Tell them Parker Madison does not partner with firms that treat our people like second-class citizens. Make it clear the decision is final." The voice on the line didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir. It's done." Royce ended the call with a single tap. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. Then he turned and walked back toward the conference room door without rushing, each step a deliberate promise that he would not hide or retreat. He didn't knock. He pushed the door open and let it swing wide. The room fell silent at once, as though someone had sucked the air out of it. Cassius Holcomb was on his feet, leaning over the table, hands planted like he was trying to hold back an earthquake. His face was mottled with red, jaw clenched so tight his temple pulsed. Delaney Price was pale, lips moving soundlessly, glancing back and forth between the folio and Royce, as if hoping for a different answer to appear. Theron Briggs sat slumped in his chair, arms crossed tight over his chest, a sullen glare replacing the smirk. Kyle's eyes were huge and shocked, darting from Cassius to Royce in panic confusion. Amara Lee was the only one who didn't move. She stared at Royce with something raw in her eyes: fear, hope, relief, apology. Royce let the silence stretch until it hurt. Then he walked forward, his shoes tapping calmly on the floor, and picked up the folio from the table where they'd left it open. He held it up, showing them the page with his signature in bold, precise ink. For anyone still confused, this is the master agreement you're so eager to finalize. The one you said you'd squeeze for every penny. The one you said you'd manipulate with PR while gutting the people behind it. He turned the page slowly, letting the document speak for itself. That's my signature. I'm the final authority. I'm the one who says yes or no. And you know what I just said? He paused, letting his gaze sweep the room. No one answered. Cassius's lips curled in something like a snarl. Royce's voice stayed calm, quiet, controlled. I said no. He dropped the folio back on the table with a muted slap. Theron found his voice, cracking with disbelief. You think you can just kill a $3 billion deal? Just like that? Royce raised an eyebrow slightly. I don't think. I know. I already did. Effective immediately. Delaney's voice broke. You can't. We have investors. We have projections. This is a cornerstone deal. Royce inclined his head, polite as ever. Then you should have considered how you speak about your partners when you think they're not important enough to matter. Cassius's voice was a low, shaking growl. You son of a bitch. You think you can walk in here and lecture us? You think you can ruin this company? Royce didn't blink. No. I think you did that yourselves the second you decided a PR stunt was better than an actual partnership. Cassius slammed a fist on the table. We'll sue. We'll drag you through court for breach. Royce tilted his head slightly. Read your own contract. I included an ethics clause. You breached it. In this room. On tape. Theron's eyes went wide. Tape. Royce simply tapped the small recorder tucked neatly in his breast pocket. I came prepared. I always do. The blood drained from Theron's face. Cassius's breathing was ragged. You'll regret this. You think you can just walk away with no consequences. Royce's eyes were ice. I'm not walking away. I'm ending this. You don't get to profit off communities you insult and discard. You don't get to buy the appearance of diversity while planning to kill it behind closed doors. Not with my name on the line. Amara let out a sound then, something between a sob and a gasp. Cassius whipped his head toward her, rage unfiltered. Did you know? Is this your friend? Your plant. She recoiled as if slapped. Royce's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Leave her out of this. She's the only one who tried to say anything at all. The rest of you were too busy laughing. Cassius rounded on Royce. Get the hell out of my building. Royce smiled faintly. Gladly. My work here is done. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. He looked back one last time. Cassius glared at him, teeth bared. Delaney had his head in his hands. Theron refused to meet Royce's eyes, his jaw working wordlessly. Kyle looked like he might cry. Amara met his gaze with eyes wet but unblinking. Royce's voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the room. I gave you a chance. I let you speak freely. I let you show me exactly who you are. He didn't need to run. The damage was already done. Back on the 27th floor, the conference room he'd left behind was in chaos. Cassius Holcomb's voice thundered through the closed door, demanding explanations, threats, promises of lawsuits falling from his lips like spittle. Delaney Price sat white-faced with his head in his hands, rocking minutely as he muttered about fixing it. And maybe we can salvage. Theron Briggs paced in tight, jerky circles, every sarcastic quip stripped away, replaced by hoarse curses and snarled accusations hurled at everyone in reach. Kyle simply stared at the table, blinking rapidly as if hoping to wake up from the worst nightmare of his life. Amara Lee sat frozen in her chair, pale and silent, watching it all with a dull, haunted stare. None of them moved as the door to the boardroom opened with a heavy creak, revealing 3 members of the Stratton and Company board, summoned in a last-ditch emergency call. They strode in with faces like carved granite, expensive suits unwrinkled, eyes cold with a fury so complete it no longer needed to shout. The board chair, a woman named Meredith Lang, surveyed the wreckage of the meeting with glacial calm before she even sat down. She didn't bother with pleasantries. Her first words were a scalpel. "What happened here?" Cassius rounded on her, red-faced, breath ragged. "It's a misunderstanding. Some 2-bit consultant tricked us, claimed he was with the client, and now he's trying to blackmail us." Meredith raised a single elegant hand. Cassius fell silent, chest heaving. Meredith's eyes drifted to Delaney. "Is that true?" Delaney swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. His voice broke. "And no, he wasn't just a consultant. He's the CEO. The contract, he canceled it." Meredith's gaze didn't flicker. She turned her attention to Amara. "HR." Amara's voice was so low it was barely audible. "It's true. He recorded them." Meredith sat back, exhaling once. "I see." Silence followed, thick enough to suffocate. Then she leaned forward slowly, every motion deliberate. "You lost a $3.2 billion deal on camera. You gave the client every reason to walk. You insulted him to his face. And you handed him the moral high ground in writing. Am I understanding that correctly?" Cassius's mouth opened and closed. Theron tried to speak, but failed, throat clicking dryly. Kyle let out a tiny, broken whimper. Amara said nothing, her eyes closed now in resignation. Meredith pressed her manicured fingers together. "Do you have any idea what this is already costing us?" As if in answer, the door banged open and a junior associate stumbled in, without knocking, breathless and terrified. "Ma'am, there's something you need to see." Meredith didn't turn. "Show me." The young man handed over a tablet with trembling hands. Meredith glanced at it, lips pressing into a bloodless line. Then she flipped the screen to the table. On it was the live stock ticker. Stratton and Company had already dropped 8% in the last hour. Red numbers flashed like a wound bleeding out. Delaney let out a small sob, hands shaking. Theron swore a vicious, ugly word that cracked in the dead air. Cassius's face fell as if all the bones had been yanked out of it. Meredith didn't blink. She turned the tablet back around and placed it gently on the table. "We've received 15 calls from our largest institutional investors in the last 30 minutes. 12 threatened to pull funding if this isn't resolved immediately. 3 said they're drafting their exit paperwork right now." Silence answered her. She raised her eyebrows delicately. "Nothing to say?" "Nothing at all." Cassius finally found his voice, desperate and cracking. "We can fix it. We can call him back. We can apologize. Spin it." Meredith's voice sliced through him. "Spin it." Cassius blinked. Meredith's tone remained perfectly calm. "You told him to deliver a threat to his boss about signing before you changed your mind on price. You called him your secretary. You said you'd squeeze his people dry for PR value. On record. This is your idea of spin." Cassius's mouth worked uselessly. Theron tried to speak again, words tumbling over each other. "He baited us. He set us up. He was waiting for it." Meredith didn't move. "So you admit he didn't have to twist your arm. You said exactly what you meant." Theron fell silent, breathing like a cornered animal. Meredith's gaze swept the table one last time. Then she stood, adjusting the cuffs of her suit jacket. "Cassius Holcomb, you're done here. Pack your office. Security will escort you out within the hour." Cassius jerked as if slapped. "You can't." Meredith's eyes flicked to the door. 2 security officers appeared as if conjured. Cassius turned red, sputtering. "This is my company. I built this." Meredith didn't even turn to look at him. "Not anymore." Cassius howled as the guards closed in, his voice cracking into shrieks that echoed down the hall as he was dragged bodily out. Delaney tried to stand, but his knees buckled. "Please, Meredith." She didn't spare him a glance. "You're finished too. You signed off on every proposal. Your fingerprints are all over this." Get out." Delaney let out a choked sob as security moved in on him. Theron stood slowly, hands up, shaking, mouth twitching. Wait, I can fix this." Meredith's voice didn't even rise. "Theron, you're toxic. I don't need you explaining jokes about charity to the press. Go." Kyle slumped forward, head in his hands, sobbing. Meredith didn't bother with him. She turned to Amara, who hadn't moved, eyes closed, tears streaking her cheeks. Meredith's voice softened, only slightly. "HR, you're staying. Clean up the paperwork. Get statements from every witness. And you'll personally coordinate with PR to help manage the damage. Understand?" Amara nodded once, silently. Meredith surveyed the ruined room. This board is not going down because of the unchecked arrogance of a few entitled executives who thought they were untouchable. This is salvageable, but it starts with consequences. She turned on her heel and walked out without another word. The door slammed shut behind her. Months passed. The Winter City turned slowly toward spring, the biting wind losing its teeth as pale green shoots began to push through the crust of frozen ground in city parks, and the sun took on a warmer, more forgiving light. But while the seasons changed predictably outside, inside boardrooms across the city, nothing had been predictable since the day Royce Mallory shut down a $3.2 billion contract with nothing more than a quiet voice and a page of notes filled with their own damning words. Stratton and Company had survived barely. The stock price clawed its way back from the crater it fell into after investors demanded blood and the press ran week-long exposés on corporate racism disguised as strategy. The board had purged its leadership like an infected wound, ejecting Cassius Holcomb and Theron Briggs and Delaney Price in one humiliating sweep. Cassius went down screaming about betrayal, the viral video of security dragging him out, ensuring he would never work in another C-suite again. Theron tried to bluff his way through a couple of high-profile interviews before settling into a sullen, silent bitterness, blaming everyone but himself. Though Delaney was different. He had vanished for weeks, maybe months. Royce didn't think about him much. He was too busy. Parker Madison's reputation had risen as Stratton's fell, drawing attention from firms who understood the value of real partnership and who were happy to work with someone who refused to compromise on dignity for profit. Royce spent his days in meetings with companies that actually listened, building supplier development programs that invested in local businesses instead of gutting them for short-term gain. He watched those suppliers grow. He watched their owners hire, expand, and reinvest in neighborhoods companies like Stratton had considered nothing more than a cheap PR hook. It felt good, but it didn't make him forget. He carried those notes with him every day in his briefcase, a reminder of how easily cruelty could pass for business. Then one morning, his assistant buzzed his line. "Mr. Mallory, there's a Mr. Price here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." Royce paused mid-sentence in his notes, pen hovering. He let the memory of Delaney's voice pass through him. "You're very articulate. This is real business." He closed his eyes once. Then he pressed the intercom. "Send him in." Delaney entered the office like a man stepping into a confessional. He looked older, Royce noted clinically. The hair that had been perfectly parted before was slightly unkempt. His expensive suit looked like it had been worn too many times to too many humiliating interviews. His eyes held no challenge, just a raw, desperate honesty. He didn't bother sitting until Royce gestured once, a command more than an invitation. Delaney lowered himself carefully into the chair across the desk. Royce didn't speak. He waited. Delaney swallowed hard, fingers knotting together in his lap. "Thank you for seeing me." Royce inclined his head slightly, expression unreadable. Delaney's eyes darted up, met Royce's steady gaze, then dropped again. I owe you an apology." Royce let the silence stretch so long Delaney squirmed. Finally, Royce's voice was calm, measured. "For which part?" Delaney's breath shuddered. "For all of it. For what I said. For what I let happen. For laughing along. For not stopping it." Royce's fingers tapped once on the desk. "You're not wrong about what you let happen. You didn't just watch. You encouraged it. You built the strategy. Delaney nodded miserably. I know. Royce's eyes sharpened. Then why are you here? Delaney inhaled shakily. Because I got another job. He winced at how that sounded. He rushed to clarify. Not because of that. Because I can't do it the same way again. I'm running a smaller firm now. Local. They want to grow. They need investment. And I don't want to build it on lies and exploitation. I don't want to be that man anymore. Royce's expression didn't change. Why come to me? Delaney's shoulders slumped. Because they trust you. Because people trust you. Because I don't know how to do it right. I only know the wrong way. Royce was silent for so long Delaney's fingers started to tremble. Finally, Royce spoke. So you want what? Forgiveness. Delaney flinched like he'd been slapped. No, I don't deserve that. I want help. I want to change it. I want to fix what I can. I can't undo what I did, but I can do better. I want to do better. Royce's gaze was unrelenting, studying the man across from him with the precision of a surgeon looking for rot to cut away. Then he leaned back slightly. I don't forgive you. Not yet. Delaney's eyes filled with unshed tears. He nodded once. Okay. Royce continued, voice even. But I'll help you. If you prove it. Delaney blinked, confused. How? Royce's voice dropped lower, hard as iron. You will sponsor minority-owned suppliers at your firm. You will pay them fairly. You will offer development loans at cost. You will hire people who know these communities and listen to them. You will publish your contract terms publicly so no one can accuse you of predatory practices. You will prove you mean it. Delaney swallowed hard, his atoms apple-bobbing. I will. Royce didn't blink. And you'll come to me quarterly. Show me the books. Show me you're doing it. Delaney's voice broke. Yes, anything. Royce nodded once. Then maybe someday we'll talk about forgiveness. Delaney let out a breath that sounded like relief and misery tangled together. He wiped at his eyes with the back of one shaking hand. Royce finally leaned forward. You want my advice? Delaney looked up quickly. Yes. Royce's voice lost its harsh edge, replaced by something heavier. Don't do this to feel good about yourself. Don't do it for credit. Do it because you owe it to every business you crushed before you realized what you were. Do it because you need them more than they need you. Do it because it's right. Delaney nodded fiercely, tears tracking down his face unchecked. Royce stood, offering his hand across the desk. Delaney stared at it, shocked, then stood and took it with both of his, gripping tight like a drowning man clutching a rope. Royce let the handshake last exactly as long as it needed to. Then he pulled away. We're done here for today. My team will be in touch. Delaney wiped his face with his sleeve, straightened his suit that still didn't quite fit right anymore, and nodded. Thank you. Royce watched him leave in silence. When the door closed, he sat back heavily in his chair, staring out the window at a city that still glittered with promises it rarely kept. He opened his folio slowly, leafing through the pages of damning words he'd refused to forget. Then he set it aside. There would always be another meeting, another Delaney, another Cassius. But this time, at least one of them was trying to be better. Royce let himself hope that was enough to start the end. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss the next one. What did you think of the plot? Did the twist surprise you? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know your thoughts and where in the world you're reading. Let's talk about what justice really looks like and how we can write even more powerful stories together.